I can't wait for tomorrow's family dinner.
Tomorrow? That dinner was yesterday. Maybe take the hint.
I did, and everything changed.
At my nephew's birthday party, I made what I thought was an ordinary comment. I can't wait for the big family dinner tomorrow. It'll be nice to catch up with everyone. My mother laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not the kind that slips out when someone has made an innocent mistake. It was a short, amused laugh, as though I had just said something embarrassingly foolish. That was yesterday, she replied. For one brief second, I smiled too. I assumed she was joking. The dinner had been discussed for weeks, or at least I thought it had. Then my aunt pulled out her phone and began swiping through photographs. There they all were, my parents, my sister, my cousins, aunts, uncles, and their children. The dining table was crowded with food. Wine glasses were raised for a toast. Everyone was smiling. In one photograph, my empty chair had been pushed against the wall to make more room. No one had forgotten the dinner. They had simply forgotten me. Then my sister looked directly at me and said, "Maybe take the hint next time." The room seemed to go quiet, even though the party continued around us. Children ran past with balloons. Someone cut another piece of cake. Music played from a speaker in the corner. Yet all I could hear was that one sentence repeating inside my head. Maybe take the hint. I did not argue. I did not cry in front of them. I did not demand an explanation from people who had just shown me exactly how little an explanation would mean. I placed my gift beside the others, hugged my nephew goodbye, and walked out. But as I drove home, the humiliation slowly changed into clarity. For years, I had been trying to earn a place in a family that was perfectly comfortable accepting everything I provided while excluding the person who provided it. That night, I finally understood the hint, and my family would soon discover what happened when I stopped ignoring it. My name is Iris. I am 33 years old, and I work in information technology. My job is quiet, demanding, and mostly invisible to people who do not understand it. Over the years, I also built a small property management business. I began with one inexpensive rental, reinvested the income, and slowly added more properties. I never talked much about my success. In my family, sharing good news often led to someone minimizing it, comparing it to my sister's accomplishments, or immediately asking me for help. It was easier to stay quiet. That silence made them believe I had very little going on in my life. To them, I was the dependable daughter who was always available. I fixed my parents' Wi-Fi. I helped relatives fill out online forms. I paid restaurant deposits when no one else remembered. I arranged repairs, covered contractors, covered emergencies, and quietly transferred money when a family event went over budget. I was useful, but never important. My sister was the center of the family. She was louder, more social, married, and had a son everyone adored. Her plans became family plans. Her preferences became traditions. If she changed a date, everyone adjusted. If I could not attend something, the event continued without me and I was told not to be difficult. Whenever I noticed the difference, my mother had an answer ready. Your sister has a child. Her life is more complicated. Or, you know how busy everyone is. Or the old favorite, family shouldn't keep score. Strangely, that rule applied only when I noticed what I gave. Everyone else remembered my contributions perfectly whenever they needed another one. The big family dinner had been presented as something special. My mother told me that relatives were coming from out of town. I offered to help, as usual. I paid part of the catering deposit and arranged for extra chairs. When the date seemed uncertain, Mom told me it would be on Sunday. I built my weekend around it. They held it on Saturday instead. No one called. No one sent a message. No one wondered where I was. The next day, at my nephew's party, they laughed when I discovered the truth. That was the part I could not excuse. Being overlooked might have been carelessness. Moving the dinner could have been poor communication. But the photographs, the laughter, and my sister's cold instruction to take the hint proved that my absence had been intentional. When I reached home, I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes. My phone kept lighting up with messages in the old family group chat. They were not apologies. They were photographs from the birthday party and questions about leftovers. The chat had once been the place where I organized everything. I had created it years earlier, which meant I still had administrator access. Over time, the family had started other conversations without me, using the original chat only when they wanted my help. I opened it, renamed it Maybe Take the Hint, and removed every member one by one. Then I turned off my phone. It was a small action, but it felt like closing a door that had been left open for far too long. The following morning, I reviewed my bank statements. What I found was worse than I expected. I had been paying for more of the family's comfort than I realized: a streaming plan, a storage unit, part of my parents' phone bill, recurring maintenance fees, and several automatic transfers for shared expenses. I canceled everything that belonged to other adults. I did not take money from anyone. I did not expose private messages or embarrass them publicly. I simply stopped volunteering my time, labor, and income to people who had made it clear that I was not part of their family celebrations. The calls began almost immediately. My cousin wanted to know why the streaming account had stopped working. My father needed help with a payment portal. My sister sent 3 messages asking why I had removed her from the group chat. My mother left a voicemail accusing me of creating unnecessary drama over our little dinner. I did not answer. The more they contacted me, the more obvious the pattern became. Not one person began with, "We're sorry we excluded you." They began with, "Why did you cancel this?" Or, "When can you fix that?" They missed my services before they missed me. There was still one much larger connection between us, the lake house. Years earlier, the family had dreamed of owning a place where everyone could gather during the summer. My parents loved the idea, but they could not qualify for the financing on their own. I used my credit, savings, and property experience to make the purchase possible. The arrangement gave me a substantial ownership share and responsibility for the practical side of the property. I handled insurance, repairs, taxes, contractors, and emergency calls. My relatives treated the house as a family inheritance, even though I was the one protecting its value and carrying much of its cost. At first, I did not mind. I imagined long weekends when we would cook together, sit beside the water, and finally feel close. Instead, the lake house became another place where my contribution was welcome and my presence was optional. For 3 consecutive Memorial Day weekends, my family had used the property without inviting me. They assumed I was too busy, too quiet, or too willing to accept whatever scraps of inclusion they offered later. After the dinner incident, I stopped seeing the lake house as a symbol of family unity. It was an investment I had allowed other people to control, because I was afraid that asserting my rights would make them reject me. But they had already rejected me. So I called my attorney and reviewed the ownership documents. I asked about my legal options, the expenses I had paid, and the steps required to end the arrangement cleanly. Then I contacted a private couple from out of state who had previously expressed interest in acquiring my share. They were retirees looking for a quiet place during the summer. They had no interest in family politics. They wanted a fair transaction and clear ownership. For the first time, I began making decisions about the house as an owner, instead of acting like an unpaid caretaker. I prepared a formal notice explaining that the old informal access arrangement was over, and that my share of the property was being sold. I also made sure every step followed the ownership agreement. I did not want a dramatic scene that could be dismissed as an emotional outburst. I wanted documents, dates, and facts. Then I waited for Memorial Day weekend. The family always arrived on Friday morning in a convoy of SUVs packed with coolers, suitcases, folding chairs, and enough food for a small festival. My sister assigned bedrooms before anyone reached the property. My mother always claimed the master suite. No one asked whether I planned to come. This year, I arrived first. The lake was perfectly still when I unlocked the house. Sunlight stretched across the wooden floors, and dust moved through the beams coming in from the windows. For years, I had rushed around this place fixing problems before everyone else arrived. That morning, I made coffee and sat alone on the porch. It was the first peaceful memory I had ever made there. Around noon, tires crunched along the gravel driveway. Doors opened. Children shouted. My relatives began unloading as though nothing had changed. Then my cousin noticed the legal notice near the entrance. Voices rose. Someone called my name. My sister marched toward the porch with her arms crossed. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. I took a slow sip of coffee. "It's Memorial Day. I thought I'd enjoy the lake." She stared at me. "Well, we planned to stay for the weekend." I told Mom she could have the master bedroom. "That is going to be a problem." My mother pushed through the group. She had the same irritated expression she used whenever I failed to solve something quickly enough. "Iris, do not be dramatic because you missed one dinner." There it was again, their effortless rewriting of what had happened. I had not missed the dinner. They had deliberately held it without me and laughed when I discovered it. I stood and handed my mother an envelope. Inside was written confirmation that I was ending the family's informal use of my ownership share and moving forward with its sale to a vetted buyer. The rest of the paperwork explained the practical consequences. My sister read over Mom's shoulder. The anger disappeared from her face. "You're selling?" she asked. "My share," I answered. The part I paid for, maintained, and was apparently expected never to use. My father finally spoke. "This is a family house. A family house where I was never treated like family." My mother tried a softer approach. She said they had not meant to hurt me. She claimed the dinner date changed at the last minute. My sister said the evening had been crowded and that I was making everyone suffer because of a misunderstanding. I reminded them of the photographs. I reminded them of the laughter. Finally, I repeated the sentence my sister had given me. You told me to take the hint. I did. No one laughed this time. They could not accept that the dependable daughter had stopped being dependable on command. They had confused patience with weakness and generosity with permanent permission. They thought that because I rarely demanded recognition, I did not notice how I was treated. My sister became angry again. She accused me of punishing the children and destroying tradition. I asked her a simple question. If this tradition mattered so much, why was I never invited to it? She had no answer. The weekend they had imagined did not happen. They could not simply enter, distribute bedrooms, and use the property as if I did not exist. They left with their coolers and suitcases, furious that I had enforced a boundary they never believed I would set. Over the following weeks, the family tried every strategy they knew. First came anger. I was selfish, cruel, oversensitive, and ungrateful. Then came guilt. My parents were getting older. The children loved the lake. Memories were more important than money. Then came bargaining. They offered to include me in future plans. They promised to create a new group chat. My mother even suggested holding another dinner, to make up for everything. But their promises focused on restoring their access, not repairing the relationship. I told them that an invitation offered only after consequences was not the same as respect. I was not looking for a replacement dinner. I wanted a family that did not need the threat of losing property before remembering that I belonged. The sale moved forward. The retired couple acquired my share under the proper agreement and brought a completely different attitude to the property. They expected schedules, written responsibilities, and mutual consent. The relatives, who once relied on my silence, now had to deal with owners who treated the lake house as real property rather than a private family playground. My family blamed me for the loss of their effortless access, but I refused to carry that blame. I had not destroyed a healthy tradition. I had ended an arrangement built on my money, my labor, and my exclusion. The most difficult part was my nephew. He had done nothing wrong. During the birthday party, he had been genuinely happy to see me. I did not want the adult's behavior to erase the affection I had for him. So I sent him a birthday card and kept the message simple. I told him that none of this was his fault, that I loved him, and that my door would remain open to him as he grew older. I did not criticize his mother or ask him to choose sides. Boundaries, I learned, do not require cruelty. They require clarity. Months passed. The silence that once frightened me began to feel peaceful. I had more time for friends who invited me because they wanted my company, not because they needed technical help or money. I traveled. I worked on my properties. I hosted a small dinner in my own home and filled the table with people who noticed when I entered the room. No one made me earn my chair. Eventually, my mother called and left a different kind of message. There was no request hidden inside it. She admitted that the family had become accustomed to treating me as the person who would always help and never object. She did not excuse the dinner. She said it had been wrong. I listened to the voicemail twice. Then I waited before responding. An apology can open a door, but it does not erase what happened on the other side of it. I agreed to speak with her, slowly and with clear limits. I did not promise to restore the old relationship. I did not volunteer to solve another problem. I simply gave her the opportunity to prove that her regret was about losing her daughter, not losing what her daughter provided. My sister took longer. She resisted until she realized the rest of the family could no longer force me back into my old role. When she finally contacted me, I told her the truth calmly. You did not exclude me once. You revealed a pattern. Selling my share was not revenge. It was me accepting what you had already shown me. Whether our relationship could ever recover would depend on actions, not promises. Looking back, the most painful moment was not hearing that the dinner had happened without me. It was seeing the photographs and realizing how happy everyone looked in my absence. Yet that same moment gave me something I had been missing for years: certainty. I stopped asking why I was never enough for them, and began asking why I had accepted so little for myself. My family believed the worst thing I could do was walk away from their table. They were wrong. The worst thing I could have done was spend the rest of my life waiting for them to pull out a chair. Sometimes the clearest message comes through silence. Sometimes being excluded from one dinner reveals every place where you have been excluded emotionally. And sometimes taking the hint does not mean disappearing in shame. It means stepping away with dignity. It means ending access without hatred. It means refusing to finance your own mistreatment. Most importantly, it means building a new table, one where love is not measured by usefulness, where invitations are sincere, and where no one has to wonder whether they truly belong. My mother laughed and told me the family dinner had been yesterday. She expected me to feel embarrassed. Instead, I finally understood. The dinner was over. And so was the version of me who kept begging for a seat.